Sorry, I'm looking at my other screen. It's showing me.
Okay.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our session, Generational Myths Busted, Leading Beyond Labels. I am going to turn it over to our session host. Go right ahead.
Hi, everybody. So glad you're here. My name is Christy DePaul. I'm the CEO of Founders. We are a content agency that works with future of work and learning organizations. Those have included learning design firms, higher ed institutions, workforce development organizations, and major philanthropic foundations. We've produced research reports and campaigns to promote new initiatives, those via social media, newsletter, etc. Content is our specialty. And we've been around for 10 years. We're a fully remote firm. And I'm very excited to be talking to you on this topic today. This one is near and dear to my heart. It's actually from a piece that I wrote, and I've been writing for Harvard Business Review for the past 5 years now, researching the future of work and producing pieces to help those who are navigating their careers. And this one is a real, I mean, what other way to put it? It's a real head scratcher that generational stereotypes still exist. And in fact, when I was creating this slide in particular, I think I asked, maybe it was Perplexity, maybe it was Gemini, to create an image that really like laid on thick the labels of the generations as we know them in the United States. And this is what it produced. And I hate to say it, it's rather accurate. So I wanted this to be my opening slide intending to sort of shock us into thinking about the fact that we are labeling people in such a way. Now, let's get started. I just want to ask all of you, this is my icebreaker. And I know we can't really do a show of hands virtually, but I understand that you can add to the chat. So I just want to ask anyone attending if they've ever experienced ageism in the workplace in any form, whether that's been in a training incident or let's say even through the recruitment process, interviews. All you have to do is just put the letter Y for yes, if you have. I'm really curious about that. We're not going to ask you which employer or anything like this, but I suspect that it has occurred to many of us. And um, while we're on this slide, I will just say I started my career in my 20s, like many of us did, right out of grad school. And one of the things that I was trying to do at 24 was seem older than I was. And everything I did, from how I dressed to how I presented myself, I was trying so hard, right? Because ageism, as we think about it, sometimes it conjures up this image of discrimination against older workers, which absolutely happens. But the pendulum swings the other way too. So younger workers as well can feel discriminated against and feel like their voices aren't heard. And anyone who's ever been in a room full of people where you are the youngest person in a professional context has likely felt that. So today's talk is based on a piece that I co-authored with Vasantara Sani. She's a former editor of Harvard Business Review. This piece was included in HBR's must-reads for 2024, and it was part of their Big Idea series talking about the 5-generation workplace. And we really wanted to dive into, we talked about a range of topics. We wanted to explore generational prejudice because it remains the one prejudice that seems so prevalent and so, how does one say it, socially acceptable in the workplace still, right? We still see instances where millennials are talked about, and that's the generation that both my co-author and I are technically from. And by the way, I'd love to share a gift link to this article with anyone attending this. So please feel free to get in touch with me after the talk. I'm happy to share the piece with you. We spent a lot of time researching it. We spoke with experts in academia and industry, also workplace psychologists about this. And it turns out that perhaps no surprise, generational prejudice is hidden within a lot of programs and a lot of approaches. So as leaders in higher ed and workforce development, it's your job to be able to root out this bias. And that's going to be the focus of our talk today. I wanted to include an image of like a fissure or a crack here because this is when thinking about the foundation of our workforce. Um, we're actually, I love this quote. It's from Kurt Rudolph, and he just hits the nail on the head. We're making a lot of decisions based on really shaky science, right? We're looking at how we treat people, how we nurture them, how we help them advance in their careers, how we recruit and retain them based on generational stereotypes. And we'll see why that's incredibly problematic. But this, I just wanted to talk about this because I think there are so few researchers focusing on generational prejudice. So this was important to have a voice from the field. So a few of the things you'll leave with today, you'll have an action plan with some concrete steps so you can start tackling age-related bias in your organization. You'll be able to, excuse me, you'll have practical strategies to build stronger. Sorry, I'm getting over a cold as well. This is really difficult. More collaborative and equitable teams. And you'll be able to use AI tools for bias detection. Oh boy, I might be losing my voice, but you guys can stick with me. So let's think about that example that I gave a while back. Thinking about when I was like 24, wishing I had some cough drops here. Excuse me. And I had a colleague who was like 84, right? So we came from very different sort of walks of life. And a lot of you are experiencing that in your organizations. So as I attempt to regain my voice here, I want to think about how you might attract, train, and communicate with these groups and look at how you're doing that currently and what that might reveal. Okay. Right. So I'm so sorry about this. I think could we hit pause on the live stream for a moment? Is that possible?
Right.
Okay. Thank you everybody for sticking around, coming back. I have a cough drop. I'm going to try to get through this with the help of Chloraseptic. We'll see what we can do. So let's think about the generation you're technically born into, right? If you're born on a cusp year, what does that mean? Are you fundamentally different from the person born a year after you? For real? Like, can you think about that? Like, imagine that you're a baby boomer and Gen X is right on your heels. Are you absolutely so different from the next person in terms of the way that you consume media, in terms of the way that you've experienced the world? I'm inclined to say no. And I imagine many of you feel the same. And yet we continue to group billions of people based on this birth window that is frankly manufactured. As a result, and I'm going to get into some policies that it's created, a lot of recruitment efforts that are just flawed and missed opportunities. So we really need to move past these labels, right, and all the catchiness of them. And I'm going to have you, if you're not already like with a fire lit under you about this, the next slide is really going to do it for you. Because you're going to see what consultants are doing with generational differences and basically how they're taking advantage of this. I'm going to let you folks read this for a moment. We have self-appointed expert consultants, right? These aren't just the big five like Bain, PwC, McKinsey, which I have on the bottom of a few of the reports. These also include individuals who say, hey, I'm an expert on Gen Z. I'm an expert millennial. Pretty soon we'll have Gen Alpha coming up. There are folks who have commanded significant fees, and by significant, I mean around There was one source that we cited that charged $20,000 to $30,000 an hour for their expertise on a given generation, right? So there are reputable groups out there, reputable organizations like these major consulting firms. You can just Google any Gen Z this, millennial that. Generally, they're focused on the younger generations, right? What can the older generations do to attract or retain, to help develop them, or to make the workplace more um, worthwhile, more interesting for them? Here's what we should actually be focusing on. These are the true behavioral drivers, okay? And I did not upload my slides yet to the attendee hub, but I will do that so that everybody here can have a look and be able to pore over this in more detail. Essentially, there are three types of effects: period effects, cohort effects, and life cycle effects. So period effects, as an example. Period effects are essentially how a major event has affected everyone in society, regardless of what their age is. We all went through this very recently with the pandemic, which forced us into online learning and remote work. For some of us, we were doing this beforehand, but many of us had to do the shift and do it really rapidly, and it was quite uncomfortable. And there were a lot of changes and a lot of growing pains. That's a period effect. Cohort effect is something that has impacted your sort of age group where you move in lockstep with a group. So think about so I wrote entering the workforce during a recession. It could also be coming of age during a time of war. So there could be very different kinds of cohort effects that are impacting you. Let's say if you were coming of age in the Vietnam War and you were part of the draft, right? Then there are life cycle effects. So this is interesting. This is a universal event. This is something that doesn't change no matter whether you're 30 years old today or if you were 30 in 1985. Think about that. You share the same core life cycle behaviors, right? Like a 30-year-old today is likely concerned with buying a house, their first home, or advancing their career. That was the same. The same was true for a 30-year-old 40 years ago. They might have gone about it differently. Today, they might be using a different medium than back then. Like they might have used a classified ad to find a job versus LinkedIn or another social media platform, as an example. But the fundamental goal is driven by their age and life stage. Okay, so these are the pieces, the behavioral drivers I want you to be thinking about when it comes to policies in your organizations, rather than looking at, again, the types of, referring to someone as Gen Z or millennial. Here's an example of beliefs influencing policy decisions, right? People have actually said this. This came up in our interviews for this piece, that those from younger generations want more flexibility. If a manager reads this or hears that, and then they take an action that just benefits one group based on their age, like that is discriminatory in practice. And when a leadership team believes something like this, like Gen Z wants this is really a priority for them, not really for anyone else. That influences all aspects of their employment experience. I don't have to tell you or explain to you why that is an issue, because certainly you could have older folks who want more flexibility. In fact, one of our interviews talked about a CEO who conducted a town hall who claimed that young folks value flexibility more than compensation. And you can imagine the result of that town hall. It was, I think there was an uproar, right? Like, how can you say that? So you had people on the younger end of the spectrum saying, we really do care about salary and we do care about compensation. What are you talking about? Why are you making this sweeping generalization about us? And then there were older folks saying, wait a minute, we care about flexibility too. They might be caregivers. They might be part of like the sandwich generation, if you will. They might be caring for older, aging parents or relatives. Maybe they simply want flexibility because it's attractive for everybody for various reasons. But that, I mean, that was a really fascinating example of how a CEO thought they were doing the right thing by making this statement. And it created an uproar across age groups within the organization. Now, here's what else is problematic, right? And we've seen this in our work as well with K-12 organizations. There have been many studies conducted that show that if a teacher, for example, has a belief about how a student will perform, the student will perform to that level. So it's not surprising then, perhaps, that in the professional context, that a teacher who believes something, right, a trainer who believes something about the group that they're teaching and like holds this sort of false construct about them will wind up doing a certain job, like in fact, a worse job if they're teaching someone who they believe is somehow has a lower aptitude. And when you tie that to age, as this study has shown, it's driven by discrimination, right? It's driven by this prejudice that like older people can't possibly be as tech savvy. So I'm going to deliver training that isn't as rigorous. This is fundamentally flawed. Now, what can we do about this? A couple of strategies for you to be able to take with you. Some do's and don'ts, and we'll start with the don'ts. You've probably seen something like a millennial leadership program, either on your campus or in your organization or elsewhere. Instead of this, focus on, think about it like a reframed sort of period effect. So what's the ultimate goal of this? Are you really looking to help people who are born within a certain period of years into leadership to ascend, or are you more interested in establishing some other sort of norm within your organization? So like here I have the post-pandemic hybrid work protocol, right? Helping people to adjust to this new environment. Maybe they went fully remote and now you're asking them to come back part of the time. What does that look like? How do people collaborate? What are the types of tools that they're using, etc. So think about creating programs that come from that perspective. Another don't, assuming anyone, I picked on folks who are baby boomers before, and I just want to also point out that, again, I think I mentioned that these generational labels are inherently American. When we think about the baby boom, that was an American phenomenon after World War II. So this is not, you can't just pick this up if you work in an organization that is multinational or has overseas partners. These generational labels do not translate just to anywhere else. So another way that they're not especially helpful. So don't assume they don't embrace new tech. Think about upskilling and the fact that, frankly, as we're seeing with the rise of AI, we all need to be upskilling, changing, rethinking the ways that we work, introducing new technologies, experimenting with them, tutoring one another, helping one another. So that addresses a cohort effect, right? So you might be encountering different digital fluency levels based on someone's skill set, and it isn't necessarily tied to when somebody was born. This slide, I actually came across this graphic in Slack, and I apologize if it offends anyone. It offended me, and I'm not a boomer. So I know that Slack can be a really sort of informal place for folks to communicate. And on this particular project, we were working with a major organization on creating training curricula. So I was really surprised to see this. It was among the icons that could be used. It wasn't that somebody was using it, but I was shocked that this even existed, right? Like, how can we have this? in 2025. So thinking in your organization, generational bias might be blatant like this. It might be hidden. Here are areas where it could be hiding in your organization, right? Thinking about only recruiting through certain channels, which absolutely overlooks digital literacy across different groups, making assumptions about older employees, and oh, the communication. I think this is probably the bane of everyone's existence. And hallelujah, I think I have gotten my voice back. Thank you. I probably shouldn't even say that out loud because I need to knock on wood, but Slack is a great example of like a 24/7 on communication that's really quick, and some people love it, and you can pin things and have threads and blah blah blah, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody either wants to communicate that way or that that's the best avenue. It's again, it's just making an assumption based on like individual preferences, and those could very well be tied to, oh, this person's part of Gen Z, so they really like those quick communications. So a few strategies to get you started. One of the things I'd love for you to do, I'm asking you to multitask during a talk, is to jot down just one policy or communication that might be based on an assumption your organization is making about a generation. And let's open this up. That could be your employees. It could be if there are students. So if you're an institution of higher ed, it could be prospective students, current students. I wrote a few other examples here. Recruitment processes, could be interview processes, training mandates, ERG language. This is something I want you to go back to after this talk to determine, is bias hiding here? And I've got a few ways that you can figure this out afterwards. So obviously stick through the rest of this talk, but I want you to be writing this down and thinking about an example that you can deconstruct in your own context. Here's a useful prompt that I used I put it through several LLMs. So this is generative AI just for text. And you can read the prompt. It is designed to root out biased language in job descriptions. And this is what came up for me in a couple of searches, right? So I use different job titles for department chairs, for directors of digital strategy. And the first two are, you might have guessed, biased toward younger folks, right? Like the second one is basically saying, we really want you to be early career. And sometimes you can get that information, of course, based on like a salary range. But coming right out and saying that, and I should also, of course, mention I'm not an employment lawyer. And there are certain things that are tied to BFOQs or bona fide occupational qualifications, but encouraging recent college graduates is one way of essentially promoting ageism and just like threading the needle on that legality. Then you have a couple of instances where you're biased against younger workers and biased toward older workers or those with much more experience, right? You're saying a record of stability. One of the interesting sort of life cycle effects that we uncovered in writing that piece for HBR was that younger folks, no matter when they were born, are less likely to stay in a job. They're more likely to job hop, I should say. Millennials are no more likely to job hop than their predecessors. And that is due to their stage of life. They have more flexibility. This was, 10 years ago, not anymore, right? They have more flexibility. Maybe they haven't bought their house yet, etc. So that is true across the board. So here, when you talk about having minimum 7 years per position, you're basically saying, younger folks, thanks so much, but maybe don't apply. Okay, looking at this from an onboarding perspective, a lot of people aren't auditing training modules or segments, and they should. And here's a prompt that you could use. You can copy and paste. And again, I will share my slides and you'll be able to copy and paste this. And there were a few different onboarding programs that I dug into for this, and just a couple of here. The first one, if you guess that it's biased against younger workers, younger employees, you'd be right. So it's making an assumption that someone has a certain skill set already. The second one makes a different assumption that no one has a certain skill set. Everyone needs to do basic video conferencing. Whereas there are quite a few folks of any age who do not need basic video conferencing. Now let's dig into professional development goals. So when we think about helping people nurture their careers, and I think this is a really interesting topic and it's often overlooked. Let's look at a couple sample goals, one for senior level staff and one for junior level staff. These are just samples. You can take your own goal, and that's what I would love for you to do, is take a goal that you've created for members of your team, put it into your LLM of choice. I named a few earlier, whether it's Perplexity, Claude, DeepSeek, ChatGPT, etc. Choose your favorite, and use this prompt and figure out, are there age-related biases in this language? It could be a single line of a goal. It could be a paragraph description. The more information you provide, of course, is going to influence the quality of the output. So would love for you to do this and then consider what the tool has found and how quickly you might be able to identify bias, not just now, but moving forward with future professional development programs. And maybe you're doing these on a one-by-one basis, you're tailoring them per employee, or perhaps you're doing this more generally and you have a PD pathways within your organization or in your department. Okay. Talking just a little bit about the true value of age diverse teams. And I think most people who work in higher ed and who work in workforce development are quite familiar with the fact that we can derive value from working with people of all walks of life. But what are some of the true values of age diverse teams? Here are just three, and this is not exhaustive by any stretch of the imagination. Right. So innovation can come from workers with decades of experience. And I think in today's job market, which is a really challenging and tight one, and frankly, the talent market is saturated, still experienced workers can offer a whole lot of insight. Here it's mentioning context and process, but they're invaluable in so many ways. And then we have folks who are early career professionals who can, yes, come in and possibly note expert blind spots that those of us with decades of experience might not be able to see. Retention is another true value, right? People who feel valued, whether they're at the beginning of the career or a few years away from retirement, when they feel that everybody can weigh in or have their perspective valued. And I would say that I think traditionally this has mainly been, let's say, skewed toward older workers or more senior workers, right? Who have more gravitas, perhaps naturally, who have ascended to leadership positions. But for organizations that have maybe a flatter structure and allow for earlier career folks to have their voices heard, it will help them to retain those people, to build their internal talent pipelines from within, which is really valuable because we all know that turnover is very expensive. And then thinking about knowledge transfer. An organization I once worked in, it was a video management company. It was a tool that was marketed toward institutions to record lectures. So not unlike this one. One of the really fascinating use cases they had for it was knowledge transfer, right? If someone is about to leave your organization within 2 weeks or plans to retire or what have you, how can you retain that incredibly valuable experience and knowledge that perhaps that they've acquired over years? Okay, well, here's one way to do it is to have a mentoring scenario where you have employees with more experience mentoring younger employees, but there's also reverse mentoring options where earlier career employees can bring their insights to members of a senior leadership team. And that can be quite revealing, right? So the way that we think others are experiencing our institution or our organization might not actually be um, how they're viewing it. So I promised you an action plan, and I have one here for you. It's got multiple steps. We'll walk right through it. I gave you some homework earlier, and I very much hope that you will do that. Here is an example of an internal policy audit. So I've set up a goal for all of us in the next 30 days. Choose your target, whether it's a document, choose a document, sorry, that's either new manager training, it could be program enrollment criteria, whatever, is relevant to your individual operation, what you happen to oversee. Gather a team of 3 to 4 people, make sure that they're small, intergenerational. Now, I know you might be thinking, but you told us not to think about generations, don't think about people as Gen Z, Boomer, etc. I want you to bring together an age diverse team. I want you to have these people, not just, so I have a tool deployment segment here, but I want you to also have these folks discuss among themselves what makes this particular document welcoming to people of certain experience levels, of certain skill sets, different walks of life, whether somebody is in their third year of their career or their 30th year. This can be incredibly revealing in terms of how it might help you shape that policy moving forward, changes that you could propose. This is going to be really important, the human element, gathering that team. Then I am adding an AI component to this. So running the document through an AI tool, using a bias detection prompt and discussing the results. It's very helpful. It's a great basis to get folks comfortable with pointing out potential flaws, with coming face to face with stereotypes that perhaps they're not necessarily looking for all the time, whether those are hidden or overt. So really the AI is a catalyst for discussion, more so than this is going to solve all of your problems and this is going to point to you every area where there might be an issue. Okay, so here's your action plan step 2. No more buzzwords, and I included also iconography. So if you happen to go into one of your communication tools and you see something like that pesky little icon that I found in Slack, I would suggest removing it. Taking those out of any internal communication and planning. Again, we're talking about an internal policy here. For external communications, you'll want to engage your comms team on those efforts, but it's certainly worthwhile, and there's absolutely a symbiosis between your internal and external comms. I would argue that you could gather all of those people in a room and discuss this. So banning those terms, then adopting sort of cohort language, right? Like if let's say you're in an institution that has gone through a recent merger, talking about your post-acquisition cohort. What does that mean? How do teams become blended? How did the leadership structure change? Or looking at employees who have pre-digital experience and the value that they bring to the table. So that's cohort language. Then focusing on skill-based value. So performance reviews, think about job descriptions. Why are we thinking about degrees and curricula and other modes of learning based on demonstrable competencies, but we're not doing it necessarily internally? So why not do that? Focus exclusively on demonstrable competencies and having a more adaptable mindset, which anyone can have at any stage in their career or their life. Okay. Aside from this, I want to just reiterate that these labels are catchy for a reason, and they've been used in uh, countless media headlines. We've seen, and you could easily just search for any one of these terms and see an array of stereotypes. But just because it's been repeated over and over ad nauseum by various media outlets, that does not make it one, factual, or two, not discriminatory. So I think that is something that's worth reiterating, because often when a term is syndicated across reputable outlets, it can seem more like fact. I would love to turn this over for some questions. I know I had a few challenges in this presentation, but I would love to hear what the audience would like to add, either about their past experiences with ageism in the workplace, or generational biases that they've seen, or anything about this presentation that sort of made you think.
And you all can feel free to put that in the Q&A portion or in the chat.
And while we wait on those, just adding that, as I talked already about job descriptions and onboarding programs, that language can be coded in different ways, right? Coded and skewed toward favoring people of a certain age group. So once you do the homework assignments and you see what is turned up, either by job, for example, job descriptions that you're about to post, or that your institution is posting, or that a peer group is posting, as an example, because that is more public facing, you might see things like phrases like digital native or energized by a startup environment, right? That is a coded language, that energized by a startup environment, implying long hours, high stress, potentially less infrastructure, lower pay. So you see these things arise, and then you'll be able to pinpoint it, whether it's, again, skewed against younger workers or skewed against older workers. We don't want to make any implicit assumptions about whether or not somebody has kept up with certain technologies, or has adopted a certain skill set, or is more adaptable than somebody else based on their level in their career.
And while we are waiting on any questions to come through the portal through CVent, first want to say thank you so much, Christy, for giving this very, very important topic and present it to us. As she said earlier, that the slides will be made available to you all in the CVent app. Also, in the app, you were able to connect with Christy. So if you have any questions or just want to connect, see some more of her work, you'll be able to do that in the Cvent app as well. I also want to take a moment to just point out that after each session, there is the survey available that you can go in and take, and that always gives us very helpful feedback. So I am going to pause a little bit more for questions to see if anything pops up. But do you have any final thoughts you want to share, Christy?
I do, I do. Okay. So there's my face. So as mentioned, there's a lot of work involved here, and it's goes way beyond a Command F search to talk about like a keyboard shortcut. Just looking for generational terms in your internal documents or shared materials. And while the above recommendations may not entirely rid your organization of generational biases, they can help you understand a few things. They can help you understand when focusing on differences might not be helpful. They can help you build programs and processes that meaningfully support people of any age. So you can create an age diverse workforce where everyone is able to contribute. It can drive innovation and equity, and those are wonderful things, and those help the bottom line as well. So my team and I have put together an ageism audit that I'm going to share in our next newsletter, and you can sign up for that on our website, which I have here. You can also ping me on LinkedIn. That's what this QR code is. You can connect with me there, and I'd be happy to share it with you, along with any piece that I've written, whether it's this generational piece for HBR or another piece of thought leadership geared toward adult learners or learners of all ages. I look forward to touching base with you, and thank you so much for joining us today and for staying with us today. It was not especially easy for me to lose my voice mid-presentation, but you all were wonderful, and I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, you all. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.